we're being honest, I know this feels good and you do too. The problem is that it is holding you back in your career and the advancement of everyone on your team. So let me know if any of these sound like you. You're the person that SVP randomly calls into their office before the reorg has ever even been announced. They want you to be in the know on these major changes that are happening. Or maybe you're the one who gets this, can you just handle this Slack message at like 4:47 on a Friday? You know that you are the person who can make things happen, and so do they. That's why they're always coming to you. And maybe you've been called a rising star or the wonderkind, right? And you've heard it so many times that it barely even registers anymore. So, why does it feel like no matter how good you get, no matter how many star players you have on your own team, that every single one of those things is still coming to you? Every single meeting that you have with the entire group, they are all staring at you, waiting for your decision. If that's you, if any one of those sounded like you are in good company, my friend, because this is what I hear from almost every high performing senior manager and director that I work with. Because you didn't get here by delegating the strategy, you got here by doing it yourself. You got here by being the person who could always be trusted to think it through. The only problem with that is it can't stay contained within you. Not if you want to go on to do bigger things, not if you want a team that is actively growing and becoming stronger. Your team can see you walk out of that VP's office, whether it's a reorg or a change in direction of what we're focused on. We used to call it getting hit from the side at my last corporate job. But they see you walk out of there knowing that there's been a decision made and knowing full well that they aren't going to understand it. They're going to come up with those phrases like, we just got hit from the side again, didn't we? They're going to say, why can't they ever just do what they say? And that's not their fault. It's not them being negative. It's the fact that they have never fully understood senior leadership's thinking or your thinking, right? They are just seeing the outcome. They're seeing the shift in direction. They're seeing the wonderful results that you get when you handle it with positivity, goodness, and with a focus on where you're going next. Your VPs, your boss's boss is starting to notice that nobody on your team can do that. Nobody on your team is able to cover for you. Nobody on your team is ready to step up into your position, right? So every time they start talking to someone that's within your sphere, whether it's on your team or a peer that you work with, they're seeing that it gets focused back to you. You're copied on every email, you're brought into every meeting, whether or not the purpose was to have you lead the charge or not. And the problem isn't that those people lack talent, it's that they've only ever seen the outcome of your decisions. They've only ever seen the end result. They've never actually seen the reasoning. And you cannot build a pipeline out of people who only ever saw the output, whether it's a failure, right? We see that we're frustrated that we got hit from the side again, or whether it is a complete success because they see how well you put everything together in this web in your mind. If your team is only seeing the output, then they are still going to bring you into those decisions. They are still going to bring you in to figure out the direction that we should go. And they are only going to drive the car. They don't have the map, you hold it. They don't control the settings on the GPS, you do. The only thing that you have equipped them to be able to do is hit the gas. And imagine that. Imagine that you are trying to grow within your own role, right? And all you've taught people to do is hit the gas. Imagine that for a student driver, right? If all you taught them to do was to hit the gas, then they would be able to go fast and they would be able to go far directly into a tree, right? Or in a completely different direction that you wanted them to go. Maybe they'd get lucky once or twice and they would get to the city or the state that you wanted them to get to. But more times than not, if they don't understand how to create the direction, create the plan, create the strategy for themselves, then they are not going to get where you want them to be. Now, most directors, they try to fix this by just delegating more, right? They give more work. They give more driving opportunities to each of these people. So they hand off the project, they hand off the deck, they hand off maybe the client call, right? And it's going to work because, like we said, they can go fast, they can go far, they know how to hit the gas. But at some point, you're going to want them to make a turn. They're going to run into road construction if we stay on this driving metaphor, right? So they're going to get to a point where there's an obstacle, there's a reason that they need to make a new decision, and they aren't going to know what the trade off is. Do I take the detour? Right? It's going to take more time, but it'll get us back on track eventually. And we'll still be getting to the same destination. It's just going to take longer to get there. Or do I go off road and take the dirt road that's going to get us to a slightly different destination, but we will get there fast? If you are a senior manager or a director or one of the higher levels of leadership, you know that there is a time and a place to do both. There is a time and a place to take the long way around, but get on the straight and narrow where you wanted to be again. And there's a time when close is close enough on the destination. We just needed to get there fast. But if you haven't established that framework for how to make those decisions in your people, then you don't actually know that they're going to make the right decision in the moment. And neither do they. And that has them coming back to you for more decisions. It has them coming back to you for more direction. They want you sitting in that passenger seat with them all of the time. And that's the difference between being a manager and being a leader. I was teaching a class once, and the class was 8 weeks long, right? We worked together through coaching and through lessons and through content for 2 months. And at the end of that class, one of the leaders in that room said, "My biggest takeaway is the understanding that there is a difference between someone who manages and someone who leads." It's okay that it took us 2 months to get there. I am not sad about that in one bit. But I'm hoping that in these next couple minutes here, I can help you to see it so much faster. Let me break this down for you. A manager has the right answers, all right? A manager can tell everybody exactly how to do things and get the right results. They can give you specific situations and say, go to A, B, C, and D, and it's done. It's sort of like following like a cake box, right? So there's steps. There's usually just like 3-4 steps on those, and you can follow all of them and you will get a cake. That's what a manager does. So think SOPs, think scripts, think process documents, right? The managers organize the information and push it forward. A leader, on the other hand, they get the right answers out loud so that the next person can get those right answers without that leader ever being in the room. So if we go back to this cooking analogy, maybe the manager is that directions, those steps on the back of the box of cake, but the leader is learning how to bake from scratch and actually understanding that eggs are a binding agent, that baking soda and baking powder are both leaveners, but they're going to work in different ways. That is the difference between leading someone and managing them, right? So a leader is going to focus less on what the right steps are, what the exact right amounts are, what the right words are, and they're going to focus more on why you structure it that way. So again, it's less about add a half a cup of water and it's more about understanding how that baking soda is actually going to lift up the cake to make it light and fluffy. The leader sees each instance not as a problem, right? They see each opportunity to bake, to, you know, take on that client call, whatever it is, as a means to learn why we do what we do. You're going to make more mistakes working with a leader. You will. And as a leader, it's okay. Your people are going to make more mistakes when you are leading them than when you are managing them. There is a time and a place for both. But what I want you to understand is accept those mistakes as ways to get closer to where you want to be. Maybe they took the dirt road when you would have preferred the detour, right? And we got one town over from where we wanted to be. You can still point them in the direction of take another left and go a few miles further down the road. We're going to get to the right end. But you have allowed them to choose the strategy and understand why there's a difference between both of them. All right. Enough metaphors, enough analogies. Let me give you some concrete examples of this. So in another class that I was teaching, I had a group that was almost all in manufacturing, I think. And as I typically do when I have new groups in those classes, I walk around and I ask them about what their goals are at the close of the course. Sometimes our courses are 8 weeks long, sometimes they are 6 months long. And I want them to have a North Star goal for that time that we have together. And a number of them who had been in their roles for somewhere between a year to 5 years would say things like, I just want to feel comfortable where I'm at. I'm not trying to get promoted. I'm not trying to take on brand new opportunities. I'm not looking for more challenges right now. I just want to feel like I have a handle on where I am. Because all they're doing now is putting out fires. They're having people come up to them and ask them to, talk to this person because they were complaining about the line they got put on and they didn't like it. Or they want them to come up with a new plan for how they should make this process run because it's not getting out on time, right? Or they want them to work with different department heads so that we don't have these silos going on and people aren't sure which direction to turn in. They were constantly having people come to them with big questions and little questions, and they just wanted to feel like they had a handle on all of it. They couldn't even think about what was next for them because they were so focused on the stress and the fires that were coming to them on a daily basis. And so, as I do, I started asking them questions about where they were at and some examples of what that actually looked like. I could understand that it would be frustrating and it would take away from thinking strategically or thinking about your career or the role that you're in with these big, grandiose plans if you have to be focused in the day to day all the time. But what does it look like for them? So one example that I got was that Peggy, who was a few levels below one of these gentlemen, was so frustrated because she had got put on a line that needed help, right? And she didn't want to be on that line. She had worked all of her past 15 years on the same line and she wanted to be on that line. That was what she knew. Those were the machines she knew how to work. And she didn't want to work on this line. Well, obviously she had the capabilities to work on these different machines. They weren't putting her in an unsafe or, unproductive role. They just needed help in a different area. And so I said, okay, well, when that supervisor came to you and complained that Peggy was complaining, what did you do? And they said, well, I told her boss what to say. I told that supervisor that they needed to tell her this and this, and she needed to get to work. And I said, okay. And so then what happened? Well, the next day they had the same need and Peggy came back again and Peggy didn't like it. So that supervisor came back again and said the same thing. And how did you handle it, manager? Well, I told them to tell Peggy X, Y, and Z. Okay. Well, there you have it. You are managing this problem. You are coming up with the plan. You are coming up with the strategy and giving it to that supervisor so that they will execute it. They aren't having to think it through themselves. They aren't having to consider what the best way would be to motivate Peggy to work on that line. They aren't having to put in the thought of how long is this going to last and how many times am I going to have this conversation with Peggy? You're not allowing them or empowering them to think through any of that. You're just handing them a script. You're managing them instead of leading them. Another example came up where one of the directors that was in our group was working with a manager who had sprint deadlines, right? And they were supposed to be getting this new project that was underway to streamline communications across the different departments. And Tom, this manager, wasn't hitting his deadlines. And so when I asked the director, like, what was going on there, he said, well, we're 1 week away from drop dead go live. There is no more time for Tom to not hit these deadlines. So I mapped out exactly what I needed him to do and how often he should get me updates and how often he should communicate with me in what ways, because we are out of time. Okay. How does that help Tom create a plan for the future? The next time you have a project, the next time you have something that needs to happen where Tom is going to be working in these sprints, what are you going to do? Are we going to take him off the project because he can't handle it? Maybe. But you don't know for sure that he can't handle it because you never taught him how to think about how the sprints are going to affect the greater whole, how each sprint that he's working on is going to impact the project, and how the project impacts the success of the company. So the issue wasn't that these directors and managers that were sitting in my classroom didn't know the answers. They knew all of the answers. Like we said at the beginning of this video, that is how they got where they are. But they were skipping right to the how for their people. They were robbing their supervisors, their managers of learning that same skill. They never learned how to choose between the detour and the dirt road because they just came to an obstacle and said, hey, driving instructor, tell me what I should do now. And you gave them left or right every single time. And when you just hand off the decision, you're still doing all of the thinking for yourself. When those directors and managers that I was working with weren't in the room for the execution, maybe it saved them a little bit of time. But when you start narrating that thought process out loud, when you start bringing people into how you think through this, then you're not just delegating a task, you're actually building someone who can make that call the next time without you. You're building someone who has the capability to define the strategy and the plan for themselves in alignment with the way you think. And if we take that one step further, they now are equipped to do that for their team as well. Could you imagine if you had, let's say you manage, 5 managers, right? You're the director, you have 5 managers underneath you, and each of those people has 10 people underneath them. Okay? You now have, if you can do this, you now have the ability to transfer your strategy, your planning to those 5 people who can transfer that same level of thought, maybe to a smaller degree of responsibility, right? Because we're talking about individual contributors now, to every member of their team. If it wasn't just you who made the decisions, If it wasn't just you who had to put the work into creating the plan and building the strategy, but instead you had 55 people who were able to think like you and are aligned with the strategy that you have in your mind, and they are able to come to you and say, when we get to this roadblock, I think we should go this way. When we get to this obstacle, I would say that our best next course of action would be to go this route. When we consider budget, when we consider customer needs, when we consider the speed at which we want to get this done, I say we do this. And maybe you correct them. Maybe you are still the driving instructor who can give them a couple of notes, but they can come to you with solutions based on the priorities that you have set forth for them. How much faster and farther would your department move? How much stronger would your organization be because you are not the person who has to own all of this yourself? You are not the bottleneck who has to be responsible for every piece of it. You are the one who has been the catalyst of change for everyone in this department. And now they are all able to advance that ball forward. When you communicate intentionally instead of just decisively, here's what actually changes, all right? You stop being that single point of success or failure in every room. Your team starts making the calls that you would make, right? They start doing the things that you would have done without you ever being in the room to make them. And you get to evaluate, right, what you've built and make corrections and cascade that message. And then you, my friend, are evaluated on what you've built, not just what you've survived and what you have, held on to at that 4:47 on a Friday night, but you were able to bring in all of these other voices and thoughts along the way. The best part about it is that this is not a personality trait. You're not just born with the ability to think this way. It's actually a skill. And it's genuinely hard to build it when you are just watching your own patterns from the inside, right? So you have to be ready to see this change in your team. If you want to get to the point that you can build out this thought process in everyone that's around you, then I need you to click the link below because I would love to talk to you about what it would look like for you to lead an organization of people who thought and made decisions strategically. And if this hit home from you, then I want you to just drop a comment for me. Let me know what the last thing was that you had to make a decision on, that you had to be brought in on, that you really thought everyone else would have been able to handle without you. All right. I cannot wait to read your comments, and I will see you in the next one.